Hey all, uh, I am going to talk to you about the movie Shazam right now. And this is a movie that just kind of surprised me because in a season, like, okay, it's April, right? Springtime is not a big time for big premieres, right? But for some reason, uh, this year, in 2019, at the end of April of all times, we have had Hellboy, Avengers Endgame, and Shazam. Now, Hellboy is more adult. There is no question about that. They made it adult. It is very adult. There is no getting around that. Endgame is much more mature, and I think it has like a PG-13 rating or something like that. But here's the odd thing. Shazam is a total oddball in this mix because it is both kid-friendly in virtually every way. Watching it, I'm like, this is actually a very kid-friendly, family-friendly superhero movie, which is great because, well, first off, it's about the DC version of Captain Marvel. And the DC version of Captain Marvel is a totally different one, which is one of the reasons why they couldn't use Captain Marvel as the name. They had to call it Shazam because that's one of the alternative names for the character. And it's difficult to work around that, so they just keep giving him all kinds of silly, childish nonsense names that I guess the writers came up with, or maybe some of the actors. But getting away from that, they decided to market this in April, like at the start of April. And it's a comedy, but here's the thing, folks. It is a Christmas movie. It takes place at and around Christmas. Every single part of it takes place around Christmas. There are flashbacks to the past. Those take place at Christmas. So it really is this Christmas movie, and yet, despite being a Christmas superhero movie, it came out in the spring. Right? So this is a little bit of an oddball. There are also very clear allusions for a lot of it to the movie Big with Tom Hanks, which, you know, is a well-known, beloved movie. And they don't make it like hit you over the head stuff. But since a lot of the story has some of those themes, elements, and parallels, there's no harm in it. There's no harm in making a little subtle nod to it because, okay, for those who don't know, let me summarize real quick. Billy Batson is a disadvantaged youth, shall we say. In this instance, he's actually an orphan under the care of the state, taken up by foster homes, and he keeps running away to try and find his mom. Well, part of the story is centered completely around that, and that gives us a little bit of pathos when it comes to his character. We can sympathize with him. We can identify with his plight. It's a very human plight. He's alone, and he wants to be back with his mom, who he got separated from back when he was real little. Anyway, and we get shown, we don't get introduced to him until later on in the film, but our first introduction is to a different character as a child, and his character is Dr. Sivana, and he was kind of an outcast and oddball with this wealthy family who owned this big multi-million-dollar company, and he gets whisked away for like a flash, just like a second our time, but in his time it was several minutes. And he was invited by the wizard Shazam to go ahead and see if he was pure of heart, or if the seven deadly sins, you know, all the same ones you knew growing up, would win over his heart and lead him into temptation to try and rule the world as their vessel for evil, for his own glory. And it's really interesting in that regard, because you get shown in between the origin story with Billy Batson and everything, you get shown that he is sort of Shazam is looking for all these other kids to take on the role and take his powers from him, so that, because he's getting old and his magic is diminishing because he's reaching the end of his life, and someone has to be the guardian against these horrible monsters, and they show them, and they're stuck in statues at the beginning, and they are genuinely horrible. They look horrible, and each of them has like all of these different facets to them. One aspect that I like about Billy Batson is that even though he is, as Shazam puts it, pure of heart and noble of spirit, he isn't a complete naive innocent. At this point, he's run away from home a few times, he's lived on the streets a few times, and he has, been sort of in the world. And so he's not a complete naive innocent who's like golly gee willikers or whatever. So when he takes on the role of DC's Captain Marvel, it isn't like something out of Jack, that ridiculous Robin Williams movie, where when he gets in a fight and the bad guy curses, he's like, oh, you're going to get in so much trouble. I recently rewatched Jack just because I forgot how horrible that movie was. Anyway, so it really is this interesting thing where they managed to make the writing good so that an adult will enjoy it, a teenager will enjoy it, and a kid will enjoy it. They managed to get that writing on that parallel level where there will be sort of subtle things, but really you won't have a whole lot of subtle stuff. People will get what it is. Like at one point, Captain Marvel goes into a strip club, which, understandable. It makes sense. And the whole journey of discovering your powers when you don't have a mentor. Because in the film, the wizard Shazam dies right after giving Billy his powers. So he's not around, even in spirit, to help him kind of discover the nature of his powers or train him at all. So there is no mentor. The mentor in this movie ends up being his foster brother, if that's a thing. But, you kind of get the point. Sort of another kid at the foster home. And they end up, being really good friends. So he and his roommate / fellow foster kid Freddy, who he just meets, but Freddy is a big superhero nerd, so he knows all about different superpowers and abilities, and can think of different ways of how to test them. And one thing that they do in order to get his name out is they put him all over the internet. They make a YouTube account for him and upload videos of him testing out his powers, which is fun and lets them kind of do things a little differently in terms of the cinematography. So everything can be done in just kind of a simple one-point perspective, and then that makes it easier for the post-production CGI people and other special effects crews to kind of make things work, as it were. Because when you have multiple cameras, you have to account for things, and it also makes it look a little bit more realistic, to be honest. Because so often we have these CGI spectacles in film where the camera is allowed to move around in an unnatural way to the viewer. So it ends up looking like a video game cutscene, if you remember Star Wars Episode 2 Attack of the Clones, where they started inserting shaky cam as part of the method of filming when they were filming the battle scenes, and it's like, oh yeah, we'll have a regular framing wide, and then we'll zoom in tight and have the camera a little shaky, as if this was a handheld camera on the battle scene. And that was always so weird to me. Like, they were going for a realistic thing, but it's like, where is that camera supposed to be? Where are any of these cameras supposed to be in this scene that is entirely computer generated? Nothing of it is real. In Shazam, you get scenes where the actor is on a location. They actually apparently did a lot of the principal filming in and around Toronto, as well as at Pinewood Studios, Toronto, which I thought was pretty cool. And it just kind of keeps you involved, and it keeps you engaged as you understand that this is part of the story. These videos that are being made that are getting the hero some notoriety make it so that he's engaging with the public in a safe way while he develops and learns his powers. And I just found it interesting that the mentor in this film is another kid. While, yeah, that brings it some allusions to Big, where, you know, at first he has his best friend, Josh has his best friend to help him kind of navigate the world, and then, you know, has to kind of send him away. In this one, there's kind of a different nature to it. Where there is that mentor role, he knows enough about it, and then the other kids in the house, because this is a foster home, they're like, I think 6 kids total, so there's like 5 other kids in the house. It kind of works, you know. Now, an interesting side note on development of this film is that originally Dwayne Johnson was going to play a role in this, either as Shazam or as Black Adam, who is kind of the evil version of Shazam. He's a former champion of these wizards who decided to use his power for his own selfish ends. And that was actually alluded to in the film when they say that they chose poorly when they chose this one champion of theirs. And Black Adam, if you ever have seen him in other media or in some of the comic books, he is genuinely an evil dude. He is very selfish, and he has all these unlimited powers. Many powers very equivalent to Superman. But these powers are magical in nature. All of the... That was an interesting facet. I noted in my review of Hellboy that you very rarely have a hero that involves supernatural, mythological, legendary elements. Shazam is one of those exceptions, where he has superpowers like a superhero, like Superman or Green Lantern or whatever, but instead of it being kind of semi-science based or based on the science of the comic book, this one is purely based on magic. It is just magic. That's all you need to know. And it's attributed to, you know, figures that you know, like the strength of Hercules, the stamina of Atlas, the wisdom of Solomon. So it's all of these Greek and Jewish figures, which is kind of cool, I thought. It would be interesting if they had thrown in the humility of Moses while they were at it, because that's actually an element that played a role in the development of Superman as we know him. I mentioned that in some reviews and discussions and whatnot. Anyway, so the filming, the cinematography, the plot developments, and a lot of the plot twists are really fantastic and fun. And one plot twist towards the end, one plot element that occurs, I thought was really cool. Billy does this thing that completely turns the tide of battle, and it's an excellent move that suddenly makes it like, oh, you don't just have to be one type of person in order to be a superhero. You can be anyone. Anyone can be a hero as long as they have the spirit to do what is right and protect others and not just be in it for themselves, which is so cool because at first Shazam really is in it for himself. He's taking money to get selfies. He's squandering his powers by shooting lightning from his hands, and that ends up causing a problem later on in the film, like almost immediately, causes a problem that he has to then go solve. And he doesn't know how to do it because he doesn't know all of his powers yet. He hasn't been training and learning and trying out new things in order to improve himself. He doesn't even find out that he can fly until much later in the film. That being said, it's really just a fun movie about superheroes. It's a fun movie about families. There is a really sad part that occurs, and there's some school bullies where I don't even understand what their deal is, because Freddy has a crippled leg, so he has a visible disability, but there are school bullies who pick on him and actually hit him with their car. They have a truck, and they hit him with their truck, and nobody immediately calls the police or whatever. And, they're actually kicking him after they take his crutch. It's like, how do you go home at night and think, wow, we really showed that disabled child who was boss for walking on the sidewalk when we hit him with our truck? You can actually get charged. You can get criminal charges for that. Endangering lives, reckless driving, attempted vehicular homicide. If you are actually aiming for someone with your vehicle, that can be considered attempted vehicular homicide. It's just one of those really horrible facets of the story. It's like, are these guys insane? Do they think that picking on the boy with the crutch makes them that much better somehow? And on top of that, then they also make fun of him for being a foster kid. It's like, what? You are literally kicking someone when they're down, and you're making fun of them for not having it was so unbelievable, where these kids' motivations came. And I was really glad that they get their comeuppance, but they don't get, completely mistreated, to the point that they're in the hospital or something like that. But they do get a couple of cases of comeuppance from DC's Captain Marvel here. So I think that was pretty cool. And it does have some good morals for the kids about that, I think you'll find. And it has a really fun twist at the very, very end that I think you'll get a big laugh out of. So by all means, do check this one out. I can't really knock on it for anything. There's nothing that I can find that's wrong with it in any way. It really is just a genuinely fun family film. It has loads of rewatch value, so you'll enjoy replaying the movie every now and again, and just re-seeing some scenes or reviewing some scenes, and finding new lessons to kind of be taken from the film. Special effects are excellent. You're never taken out of the film by something being overblown or not developed enough. Everything is in good proportions, and I think you're really in for a treat here. So by all means, check it out. I'm going to give it a 5 out of 5, just because it kind of deserves it. And DC has been getting crapped on for being all of these downbeat, gritty, morose, melancholy movies, and they managed to have one that is genuinely fun, but without ripping off of Marvel for its formulas. They managed to do a lot of original stuff. And this film has been in development for about 5 years at this point, so it's been in and out of production hell. So they've done all the pre-production. They've had cast members sign on and then leave. So having this one finally made, and having it made with a younger cast so that they can come back and produce a sequel, is really awesome. I love that. So hopefully we'll get to see a sequel in short order. That'll be really fun if they do. And yeah, totally check this one out. It's available wherever you can see films, both in cinemas right now, and then it'll easily be available on all of your various streaming services in no time. It's definitely a family-friendly watch, and I think you'll get a huge laugh out of several scenes. I won't even spoil the allusion to Big that they make. That's a really fun point where they make a little reference to Big. So if you want to click like, click subscribe, ding the bell, do whatever you gotta so that you'll see more of these videos. And if you want to, please click over to patreon.com and look me up, Claudia, just like the channel name. And I would love it if you would donate so that I could produce more of these videos and any other kind of content you might want to see. I am always willing to take suggestions as long as they are constructive and respectful. And if you have any comments to leave below, make them just as constructive and respectful as you can. Anyway, thanks a lot. Take care. Bye-bye.